Welcome to this recording on the Policies, Practices, and Procedures Review for the 2024 Compliance and Improvement Monitoring for Significant Disproportionality, or CIM for SIGDIS. This recording is brought to you by the SPP-TAP, or the State Performance Plan Technical Assistance Project, with funding from the California Department of Education through a contract with Napa County Office of Education. I'm Susan Stewart, and I'm the project manager with SPP-TAP. This information was recorded to support significantly disproportionate LEAs, or local educational agencies, in completing the federally mandated annual review of policies, practices, and procedures. You've heard Connie Silva, our project director from SPP-TAP, talk about the legal requirement for completing a policies, practices, and procedures review that identifies factors contributing to significant disproportionality. The Code for Federal Regulations pertaining to this activity is listed on this slide. In a moment, Dr. Mildred Browne, one of the SPP-TAP Technical Assistance Facilitators, will walk you through the Policies, Practices, and Procedures Matrix, or the PPP Matrix. This is a tool that, while not required, is highly recommended for the use of completing your annual PPP process. This will allow you to do that process in a complete and robust and comprehensive manner. Later, you'll hear from Trena Spurlock, who's another SPP-TAP TA facilitator, who will describe how she supplements the PPP matrix review with empathy interviews that reveal how the policies and procedures are actually implemented in practice. The information from all aspects of the PPP review process will assist your team in identifying the root causes of significant disproportionality in your LEA. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Mildred Browne.
Today, we're talking about significant disproportionality, policies, practices, procedure review matrix. We really believe that this is an outstanding tool to support your work in regards to your review of the policies, practices, procedure. You'll see this is like the cover sheet for the matrix, where you will be actually meeting together with your leadership team, or farming this out as a special task for a part of your leadership team, but you will have an opportunity to use this tool to analyze your policies, practices, procedures. I want to be able to stress the fact that this is unlike the policies and practice procedure you might have already done for compliance. It really is not compliance that we're looking for. We're looking at your policies, practices, and procedures as relates to how they're being implemented in the district. And finally, to look and highlight the cultural lens in regards to addressing disproportionality. We believe that if in fact you utilize the matrix, that you will be able to see after your discussion about the matrix with your leadership team and with your ed partner group, that the matrix will certainly maybe even identify some root causes or at least barriers to the work that you're attempting to do in regards to your CIM for significant disproportionality plan. So here's the actual template, policy, practice, or procedure document, where you'd start, the date written and last revised. How does this relate to our root cause may come after you have finished the process, where you'll go back and take a look at possible root causes. And then what's most important about this process is, does it reflect equitable access and opportunity? And then, is there evidence of dissemination and fidelity of implementation? And then what's really great is, does it need to be written or revised? And you can see here that in this sample is a yes. And then what policies, practice, procedure, or specific sections need to be updated and written. And then the final column is what might go in your actual plan activities, which would be, what do you intend to do in regards to policies, practice, procedure? So let's take a look at the sample. The first policy is in regards to special education. And you can see that there's a whole list of board policies that are relating to special ed. And if we look at the sample, it's saying the board policies identified related to the identification and eligibility for special ed need to be updated. All of them need to be updated. And then all the policies have been written and revised to conform to CSBA. And then finally, in this next column, board policies are utilized to develop administrative regulations, special ed handbooks. So with our sample, we're looking at the fact that all of the policies need to be updated. So the next set of policies is in regards to pupil services and discipline. And even though many of our districts have asked us, well, why are we worried about discipline? What we're seeing with our quantitative and our qualitative data is that many times discipline is a pathway into special ed. So you definitely want to take a look at your policies. So we're looking at board policy 5144.1, suspension expulsion. And this is saying that it was last revised in 2015 and that they added in 2018 a behavior matrix. And then how is it related to our root cause? They came back and said that the district data suggests that policies with regard to suspension and disciplinary practices are not being appropriately implemented across student groups by race and ethnicity. The behavior matrix, if implemented consistently, does in fact reflect the equitable or cultural lens that we're looking for. And then the evidence of dissemination, administrators and support staff were interviewed. And we will say a little bit later about the empathy interviews that are very complementary to the review of the policies, practice, procedure, which shows if in fact there's consistency around implementation and fidelity of that implementation. And then needs to be written or revised, it's a no. And then the strategy. So you see training and consultation with principals around implementation of the policies, practices, and procedures, including the behavior matrix. This is something that can certainly be put in your plan, but because it may or may not have this area to do with special ed, you would have to consider if in fact there's funding from the CSACE or CIM for significant disproportionality plan to support this work. So this year, we're looking at a change in the ed code as far as the implementation of SB 274. This was a legislation that was passed and approved and goes into effect July 1, 2024. So we want to really take a look at the discipline, suspension, expulsion policies to see if in fact the district has updated their board policies to include language that would say students can no longer be suspended for 48,900K, or which is disruption. So that's really important that districts this year take a look at that. And when we're looking at policies, practice, procedure, that's an area where we want to be sure that we've updated the policy to reflect the mandated changes in SB 274. The next area is suspension or expulsions for students with disabilities. As you know, the suspension of students with disabilities can certainly be an indicator for significant disproportionality. So you definitely want to take a look at this board policy to be sure that it's been updated. Many districts, because they updated their local plans, may have already updated this policy, but it warrants an opportunity again to take a look at this particular policy, because one thing we know is that if in fact the policy has not been updated, that it will need to be put in this far right-hand column, which suggests a board update and then a presentation to the leadership team and to the school board and any training needed for site level leaders. Another area is Section 504. Many times we overlook Section 504 as an opportunity as an intervention before students are placed into special ed, particularly if we're looking at an indicator like other health impaired or even emotional disturbance. So Section 504, in fact, can be underutilized, particularly if, in fact, there is no clear policy or handbook which talks about Section 504. So you'll see on the matrix that we're talking about looking at Board Policy 6164.6 and also further down Section 504 Handbook. And the handbook is really important to see if it's been updated and is it also parent friendly. Many districts have a Section 504 handbook for the staff and then a follow-up parent resource guide for Section 504. So it may mean that you're looking at all of these documents as artifacts to support Section 504. The next one is certainly crucial in that the special ed procedural handbook. Many times if you're in a multi-district SELPA, then the special ed procedural handbook is a SELPA document. If in fact you're single district, then you're looking at your own district special ed procedural handbook. You can see in this sample, they don't have any handbook. And how it's related to their root cause that they came up with is lack of guidance has led to over-identification of white students for special ed. So the guidance that we're talking about is how are students in general education, how do they journey into special ed, and what are the technical rules and opportunities for students as they move into special ed. And that's why it's so important to see if in fact there is an equitable lens and opportunity for students to have pre-intervention activities and supports before they're moving into special education. And so in this far right column, it says specialized training for all staff role groups will be facilitated after the document has been written and approved. The other follow-up to all of this is certainly your student study team. They go hand in hand as far as documents and artifacts. In that, how do students get referred to special education? Usually most districts use a student study team or student success team process. You can see in our sample that it was not updated. In fact, it hasn't been, it was written in 2004 and not updated since then. And then the root cause, a lack of guidance and inconsistent implementation has led to the over-identification of white students for special ed. And once again, even though we're talking white students, we're talking about an equity lens. So we want to be sure that the student study team handbook definitely has the cultural lens that looks at supports for students rather than jettison them into a special ed assessment. So the implementation indicates a spotty implementation, and that could certainly be because it hasn't been updated or shared. And then what needs to happen is the handbook must be completely updated and revised. Training for all staff will take place after revision has been completed and approved by the administration. This certainly, once again, may be an activity in your plan and would certainly be under your policies, practice, procedure section. We also have other areas of policies, practice, procedures for review. And as I mentioned briefly about empathy interviews being a great opportunity for finding and learning about the dissemination and fidelity of implementation, I'm going to turn it over to Trena Spurlock, who will continue to share information in regards to the empathy interviews, as well as the utilization of the matrix tool.
Thank you, Dr. Browne. The next section on the matrix lists additional policies that you might want to consider based on your quantitative data and other data points. For example, if you have attendance as an issue, or if you're a high school district and looking at how students are placed in your alternative programs, and even looking at your English learner policies, but specifically your designation procedures, this is one of the places where you could customize your policies, practices, and procedures based on your LEAs data. In the categorized questions, Dr. Browne went over the structure and the components of the matrix. Remember, the federal government mandated the annual PPP review and has elevated it as a very important component of the plan development process to address significant disproportionality. How then does an LEA elevate the policies, practices, and procedures review to a more than just verifying the existence of a policy and reporting the board approval dates? Well, the PPP process can truly provide the district with the foundation of its government as it's reflected in its culture. That empathy interview is a valuable tool that addresses three key areas: quantifying the fidelity of implementation of the PPP, looking at the policies, practices, and procedures through a cultural lens, and assisting with the identification of root causes. In my experience, the technical assistance facilitators have used two ways to address gathering the data around the questions listed at the end of the matrix. As Dr. Browne said, the first way is to have your empathy interviews conducted by a neutral party. It can be your technical assistance facilitator or someone who is seen as a neutral party in the district. This allows the interviewees to share openly and honestly their thoughts about implementation. The other way is to have the individual practitioners on the leadership team thoroughly consider the questions and then bring the responses to the leadership team for discussion. This requires that all practitioners are willing to be open and honest and feel that it's safe to share their thoughts with the entire group. When you use your technical assistance facilitator or the neutral party for your empathy interview process, the first step is to select staff from the list of recommended role job titles to be included in the interviews. You can determine if you have similar jobs titles in your district or if you want to add additional staff. The interviewee should be a combination of district office staff and leaders, as these are the staff who are responsible for implementing the policies, practices, and procedures. Some of the folks that we've had have been superintendents, assistant superintendent, the director of diversity, equity, and belonging, the director of curriculum and instruction, student support director, or the director of discipline and CWA, coordinators of 504, Section 504, directors of the EL program, director of special education, and a coordinator of mental health and behavioral intervention sciences. Also, from the site administrators, you might want to consider at least 2 high school principals if you're a comprehensive school district, 2 middle school principals, and 3 elementary principals. The interviewer uses the empathy interview guide questions to evaluate how each of the policies reflects equitable access and opportunity. Empathy interviews are conversations. It is not a survey, but rather a dialogue with the practitioners who are tasked with implementing the policies, practices, and procedures of the district. The interviews typically last between 45 minutes to 60 minutes. The interviews with the practitioners are conducted individually with administrative staff members using the same set of questions called an interview guide. The interview guide helps to gather consistent feedback about the issue from different perspectives. It also assists with uncovering recurring themes and insights related to the issue, including their relationship to root causes. And the empathy interviews allows for participants to share their perspectives in an open, honest manner. The responses are anonymous and thus allowing freedom of expression. The individual responses are analyzed and the trend data regarding specific areas are noted. Once the thematic trend analysis is completed, the trend data is shared with the leadership team and the educational partners group to assist with the identification of potential root causes. The 6 areas that I've used around those questions are listed on our matrix guide: equity and culture, MTSS or pre-referral intervention, SST, discipline, 504 plans, IEPs. An example of equity and culture responses after you do the trend analysis might say something like this: 83% or 10 of the 12 practitioners indicated that based on their experience, the district's policies and procedures in the area of non-discrimination and equity are not well known to administrators, teachers, and classified staff. Another example is 75% or 9 of the 12 practitioners indicated that the policies and procedures regarding equity and non-discrimination are not consistently implemented. So we have verifiable data that they're not well known, not consistently implemented. Another example of some of the data that could be generated by an empathy interview is 92%, or again, 11 out of 12 of the practitioners indicated that cultural and linguistic considerations are not adequately addressed by the district's policies, procedures, and practices. They did indicate that the work of diversity, equity, inclusion is in process. So you can see how using the empathy interview process gives you some really strong data regarding how those policies, practices, and procedures are being implemented, and gives the leadership team and the educational partners ideas of what to do regarding the development of additional policies, practices, and procedures. The questions can also be revised to reflect a specific focus, like early childhood programs and their practices regarding identification and placement of students for special education services. At the end of the interview, I like to ask the culminating question as to why the practitioners think the district is significantly disproportionate. With the permission of the respondents, I am able to take their quotes and the responses. They are shared anonymously with the leadership team. This is a valuable source of qualitative data that focus on the fidelity of PPP implementation and the root causes of disproportionality. In the PPP review process, empathy interviews are specifically designed for the practitioners who are responsible for implementation of the LEA's PPP. Empathy interviews are not the only source for collecting information regarding PPP implementation. You will still need to gather qualitative information regarding your policies, practices, and procedures from your focus groups, including parent and student voices, and also other role groups regarding their experiences with the implementation of policies, practices, and procedures. The policies, practices, and procedures empathy interview process is a valuable component in your CIM for SIGDIS plan development. Thank you, and I'll turn it back to Susan.
Thank you, Mildred and Trena. We appreciate you sharing your expertise, your insights, and your experiences with us. For all of you viewing this video, please join us for one of the Step 1 in-person workshops where you'll have an opportunity to engage with others around the Step 1 CIM for SIGDIS process and activities. These workshops will be held in 6 locations in California throughout the month of April, and I encourage you to register your team for one of those locations. The registration link can be found on the SPP-TAP.org website on the Significant Disproportionality page. You may also contact Connie Silva, SPP-TAP Project Director, me, or CDE if you have pressing questions that cannot wait until the Step 1 workshop you plan to attend. Thank you for taking the time to view this recording.